Hello, and welcome to the Tech Cynics podcast. I'm Suhail Rahman. I'm a PhD candidate in computer science at the University of Chicago, and we also have Govind Menon.
Hey guys, Govind here. I work in the product management space, developing apps that disrupt.
All right, so welcome to the first episode of the Tech Cynics podcast. So we're trying to keep this as a casual discussion on technology topics, and we want to focus mostly on the general tech sector, news about automotives, news in the gaming space. And once in a while, we might do some deep dive on some topics. And the major intention of this podcast is to focus on topics using more of a global lens and not just focused exclusively on just the US or just India, but we kind of want to do a mix of both of them and kind of compare and contrast what the general attitude towards different technologies and technology news is coming from those two lenses. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And for this podcast, we're going to try to keep it sort of casual and kind of discuss topics as we see fit. So I hope you enjoy the contents of this podcast and let us know your feedback. We'll be giving some of our contact information soon. We'll probably record this again towards the end of the podcast and edit it in post. But I guess now that sort of that intention has been established, we can go straight into sort of the tech news of the week, and then we'll talk about our opinions about this. How does that sound, Govind?
Awesome. I mean, you couldn't have said it better, right? So we're new at this. We gotta come right out front and say that we're new at this. We're excited. We want to take this to 10x eventually. We've started out. We've got a good start. Suhail's obviously got a lot of tech background, and he knows what he's talking about when it comes to technology. So I hope this is as exciting for you guys as it is for us. So let's get started.
All right, so we'll start with the news articles of the week, and for this week, some of the big news the news that came out on, the different technology websites, will sort of be covering that very quickly. But I think one of the biggest news articles we had this week, and this was first reported by Variety magazine, is that Netflix is planning to charge users that share a password, and I thought that was really interesting. So, what are your thoughts?
It's more than interesting, Sue. It's hilarious because it's it's very hypocritical as well, right? So if you want to increase your user base, I mean, there's two ways to do that, right? So you can either do a lot of marketing, and which obviously Netflix is a household name now, right? They don't need to do that anymore. But they got to be sensitive about different types of markets as well, right? So US, Netflix has been around forever, and in India it's fairly recent. In India as well, it's completely premium, right? So every other OTT is coming in at about 500 rupees a year, but Netflix is coming in at way higher than that if you want HD content. And it's not uncommon for people to share passwords and multiple users to use the same account. I mean, what are they thinking? Like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work for certain markets.
Yeah, I think they're under this intense pressure to keep their sort of like annual revenues going up, and it's almost like a losing battle because they're losing content as well, right? Like, so their exclusivity deals are pushing through. There's a lot of fragmentation happening in this space, in the sense that newer streaming platforms are just mushrooming left, right, and center. Content owners are launching their
Absolutely.
own streaming services, and then they're taking back their sort of exclusives. Netflix is paying through the nose to try to retain exclusivity for some of their big titles here in the US, like, for example, Seinfeld and things like that. I mean, on a more personal note, what's really funny from what I believe is happening is that, so, like, personally, I'm on a T-Mobile connection for my cell phone. I share it with 5 of my friends, and as part of that T-Mobile subscriber deal, we get like Netflix Ultra HD as part of the package. So by definition, because I'm on like a multi multi-pack subscription, like of like
Yeah,
4 different voice lines, I should be able to share my password with the 4 guys who are paying into that phone plan, right? So it's really
that's
crazy.
true. I mean,
The
it really depends, right? It really depends on like how that plan on T-Mobile is classified, right? Is that called a family plan? Because then Netflix will be like, okay, cool,
Yeah, but
because it's intended for family, you're fine with that.
yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, so there's nothing in the, as far as I know, there shouldn't be anything in T-Mobile terms of service that say that anybody, people on a phone plan need to reside in the same household. So it's a little sticky over there. Maybe there's, I mean, I'm sure there's an obvious other Netflix terms of service that comes with being part of the T-Mobile service. But anyway, we can talk about the legalese as much as you want. It's a very really bad look. And the hilarious thing that I wanted to point out, folks who are watching this podcast on YouTube will be able to see this, but for those who are listening to the audio only, on March 10th, 2017, there was the series of tweets from Netflix, which has come back to kind of haunt them as they make as this. I mean, they've not made any official announcement about this. It's just some insider news, and the fact
It's
that they're planning to test this in select smaller markets like Chile and a couple of other markets. But anyway, so Netflix tweeted in March 10th, 2017 that love is an addiction, and followed by love is sharing a password. So it's definitely r/age like milk tweet. I literally think that I actually think that that's what I saw on Reddit as well. So it's testing this password sharing stuff in 3 Latin American countries: Chile, Costa Rica, and Peru, or at least it's planning to. Netflix actually announced this, and according to the analysis that by Cohen and Company, they say that Netflix can generate an additional $1.6 billion, that's billion with a B,
wow.
annually, just by including this upcharge. But let me tell you right away, like for markets like India, that Netflix is already getting.
Yeah, that isn't happening, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, see, their pricing strategy for India has been completely different, right?
yeah,
So they've got mobile only options. They've got,
yeah,
I mean, the mobile penetration in India is so high that if you don't do something special for that community, you're losing out, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
Netflix has specific plans dedicated to mobile only, and that comes in a very small price point,
yeah,
right? So they're winning there. I mean, if you come specifically talking about the password sharing issue,
yeah,
that's going to be a problem in India. That's going to be a problem just because they're going to lose a lot of users, right? Nobody wants to subscribe for full cost.
yeah. No,
And that
absolutely.
was this was the workaround.
Absolutely, I agree. And I don't have the figures right now for this podcast, but I believe that the segment leader in India is Disney Plus Hotstar, um, for
Wouldn't be
OTT,
surprised, yeah.
and maybe at some point it's Prime as well. But I'm sure Prime is above Netflix in some sense with subscriber base, especially because they offer a better value product in the sense they also
Yeah.
offer
I
Prime
mean,
shipping and all of that stuff, right? So
exactly, right? So, I mean, Prime, interestingly enough, they've bumped up their Prime pricing. I mean, it's
yep,
way cheaper than the US for sure,
yeah,
but uh, but they've still bumped up, I think, 50%
yep,
up on previous year's rates. Um, they obviously have new openings for incentives for students and student rates and so on. That's new for them,
yep,
but they're still coming in at a much higher price point than if you compare it with the past 4 years or so.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's starting to get to a point in the US where it's a little more of a hard sell, Amazon Prime. If you're like me and you live in more of an urban agglomeration, like Chicago, for example, and I'm sure the case is true in India as well. Amazon is aggressively pushing same day deliveries now without much of an
Oh yeah,
upcharge.
we have 2 hour here as well.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
mean, yeah,
not specifically where I stay, but
yeah.
all the T1 cities, two
Yeah,
hour
exactly.
deliveries
Yeah,
available.
yeah. T1 series. Yep, exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, and the value proposition of Netflix is also starting to decrease over time. They have obviously pivoted to original content, but the quality of their original content or original productions can sort of waver a bit. They seem to be
I
heading
think
in
that's
all directions as well.
that's something that Netflix has been doing as well, right? So over the
Yeah.
past few years, like initially, if you look back in time, they had really good original
Yeah,
content,
that
right?
was my
They
point.
had a few, and that was really good. Now they've just like scattered like all eggs in all baskets, right?
Yep,
So
yep, yep,
everything is doable. Everything is some other target market, right? So your
yep.
target audience as Netflix is everybody. Now, if you want to cater to everybody, you got to make everything. I mean, that's at some point not going to work out,
Yep.
economy wise.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so let's move on to our next topic, and this is sort of like India focused. So, Coinbase, which is a cryptocurrency exchange, has added support for UPI. This was reported by TechCrunch.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, there seems to be a little bit of a push and pull in the Indian crypto scene.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean, it
go
was
ahead.
just regulated last month, right? So we do our financial reviews every year in February,
Yeah.
and basically they came out and said, "Hey, we can't do anything about digital assets. So what we're going to do is tax you like insane, right?
Yeah,
So we're going to tax
I
the
mean,
hell out of your profits."
yeah, so, trying not to get too much into politics in this podcast, but it's inevitable when you talk about things like
Yeah,
cryptocurrency and technology and the differences between different governments. But the finance minister also went on record saying that just because we are going to tax digital assets doesn't mean that we believe that crypto is legal in quote unquote legal. So that's also really
yeah,
interesting. That flat 30% tax on monetization of digital assets, essentially saying that if you basically take a digital asset or transfer a digital asset, or monetize it, basically do a conversion back to rupee in whatever sense, then you're going to have a
hmm,
flat 30% tax on whatever that charge is, or whatever it's almost treated like a capital gains tax, right? So it's going to be really interesting to see what the situation is. I have a very shallow understanding of the crypto market, especially in India. But my understanding from sort of like, online forums is that obviously people are not happy, and that the big folks are, sort of
I
like,
mean, that's generally the
yeah,
sense, right?
yeah,
So that's what's going to happen, right? So
yeah,
the whole point of DeFi is that it's not regulated, right? So
yeah,
in the end of the day, when you say that, hey, your investments here are going to perform worse for you than the standard kind of package that we
yeah, yeah,
offer,
absolutely.
what is your USP, right? So
Yeah,
unless it's something like Bitcoin, when your investment is going to go 100x just
yeah,
overnight,
yeah,
unless something like that like really happens, you're not really going to make a killing, right? So
yeah,
there are a lot of local coin exchanges that have started operations in the recent past, and
yeah,
they're doing really well for themselves, right?
yeah,
So you've got CoinSwitch, you got WazirX,
yeah,
you got Binance is operating in India now.
yes,
So you
yes,
got all these different exchanges, right?
right,
And I think the leading ones are CoinSwitch and WazirX, just because of their product placement and marketing that they're doing right now, right?
yeah,
So I mean, the appeal to invest in these portfolios would be uh, much higher from these marketing pushes, right? So you have your A-list celebrities basically endorsing this stuff and saying
hmm,
that, hey, you can get in on this action for 100 rupees.
oh yeah, absolutely,
And
yeah,
at that point you're like, hey, what am I doing in my life? Like, I might as well just drop some cash in
yeah,
here and then see what happens, right?
yeah,
I mean that's kind of the tone that the ad sets as well. Is,
yeah,
dude, like, it's $100. What are you gonna do with it? Like,
yeah,
what else would you do with it, right?
yeah,
So get started, get in on the action, and then maybe it snowballs.
yeah. Absolutely. For folks who are watching this podcast on video, I have I'm sharing my screen right now, and I'm showing sort of what the customer input flow, or like the ad payment input flow for Coinbase wallet looks like right now, as reported by TechCrunch. So if you select sort of like the UPI option, you are required to verify your UPI ID and enter your PAN number, which is interesting. So yeah, so the basically what happens is, if you're going to stick to some of the big exchanges that have an actual presence in India, essentially, all of this stuff is going to be tracked. So which kind of takes away from the quote unquote anonymous nature of cryptocurrency. But then that's the kind of the
Cryptocurrency,
point, right? Like, the
exactly.
government absolutely does not want to have money flowing between
So it's
individuals
it's
without
it's
them.
not anything else.
Yeah.
it's just hype beast right now. It's just hype,
Oh,
right?
100,
So it's
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
like in India, it's just
Yeah.
hype. Like
Yeah.
lot of people have gotten funded to, push the agenda, right? So,
Oh,
and
100%.
they got to do it. They got to
100.
do it. I mean, that's how these things work out.
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
Um,
It's hype, and in traditional finance speak, I guess they call it a speculative asset, right? Like a massively
yeah.
inflated speculative asset, and on we might cover it in this podcast. I think we might take it to the next one, but we really want to talk about NFTs and the metaverse
Oh
and
yeah,
Web3,
I
and
actually read up on something very
yeah,
interesting on NFTs recently.
yeah,
Well, actually today.
yeah,
Um, I mean, we could definitely talk about this
yeah,
tomorrow as well, or the next
yeah,
episode. But
yeah, yeah.
the latest one I saw was Mahindra. They are releasing Thar NFTs.
Oh my god.
Okay,
Oh my god.
why? Like, just why?
Yeah, I mean, since we've kind of broached the topic, I'll also talk about the one of the funniest pieces of news that I've seen related to NFTs, and this was reported on by the Hindustan Times. I'm sorry, actually, Taler Mehendi is apparently planning to start Balle Balle Land in the metaverse. So he's
It's funny you should say that because this video was totally metaverse back in the day. Like,
that's true. That's true. So he's leaning in heavily on his popularity with his his main song, right? The Tunak Tunak song was a global meme, continues to be a meme, and now he's basically
exactly.
staked his claim in the metaverse and started his own version of Disneyland, and he's also released an NFT in addition to this. And the funny thing is that this is NFT is a passport which says that you're a founding member of Balle Balle Land. And I find that especially ironic, given that, a couple of years ago, as reported by Hindustan Times, he was found guilty in a human trafficking case where he would
Oh, damn.
so he would basically have these concerts here in the US and Canada, and he would basically shuttle people from India on the pretext that they're part of his troupe or his performance
Mhm.
crew, and then basically drop him off in Canada and say, yeah, go do whatever you want. So the fact that he has a passport NFT
Right.
is just icing on the top of this ironic cake that is the metaverse and NFTs. But yeah, we true to the name of our podcast, we are especially cynical about NFTs, Web3, and the metaverse, and
Yeah,
we
for
will
sure. I mean,
we'll
see, the technology is there. We're not, I mean, I personally am not like cynical about the technology. The technology has potential, right?
yeah, oh
It's
yeah,
everything
it
that
does.
goes around it
Yeah,
that is just like sometimes it's way too much, right?
it,
I mean, a
yeah,
lot of people like to say that, listen, it's like the internet when it came out, like
yeah,
nobody was accepting of it,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
it's like, well, what are these emails? Like, what are these websites, right? All of this stuff. It's really not. It's really not that it's just it could be just me, but it's not that because back in the 90s when internet was kind of spotty and then you had to do dial up and everything, not everybody had the access. Now everybody has access. Now everybody gets the same amount of information if they want to get it,
yep,
right? So everybody's walking around with a news device in their hands, and you're going to get the information regardless. So it's
absolutely,
not
yeah.
like anybody's going to be missing out because they didn't know about it, right? It isn't
Hmm.
that. It isn't one of those cases. The use cases, like maybe out of 100 use cases identified, maybe two are going to pick up and really rock it. um, but other than that,
Yeah,
it's yeah, let's
and
let's be cynical about it.
yeah, no, and the absolute elephant in the room when it comes to all of these decentralized technologies that are based off of the blockchain is going to be their energy usage, right? And then the fact that um, you
Yeah.
know, I mean, Ethereum is planning to move over to a proof by stake. For listeners that don't know, the blockchain technology relies on the fact that there's this global ledger of transactions that's independently
Hmm.
maintained by miners. Miners are adversarial in nature in the sense that they all compete to create the next page of this global ledger by listening to transactions and then mining the next page by essentially, if you boil it down, solving a very hard math problem that increases in difficulty over time to keep up with the increase in computing power. In the beginning,
Yeah.
this was pretty fine because the number of miners were less, the mining rewards were higher. But at this point, since it scaled
And the math
exponentially,
was easy, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
the
yeah,
math was like fairly simple.
yeah, the math has scaled exponentially over the last 10 or so years to the point where, blockchain, especially for things like Bitcoin, the power usage is now exceeds entire countries. And
And that's something like I was always curious about is like, see, there is a cap, right? There is a cap, there is a limit or a hypothetical limit of where this can top out, right?
yeah, so Bitcoin has a hard limit on the number of coins that will be mined as a result of a block reward from from mining the next page of the ledger or whatever, the next block of the ledger. But at some point, and I think there is a prediction on sort of like a time and a date when that will happen, uh, that will stop completely. And then there will be a set amount of bitcoins in circulation, and that's it. Now every further page
Yeah.
after that point is going to be basically mined as transaction fees. So every transaction that needs to be included in the ledger will have transaction fees. It's almost essentially happened with Ethereum, I believe, because Ethereum has something called
Yeah, I mean that was my
gas
next
fees.
point
Yeah,
is
yeah,
gas fees, right?
yeah, gas
Like
fees.
gas fees is ridiculous. Sometimes it negates the entire point of that coin, right?
I mean
So
that's kind of the point, is that that's a true indication of sort of just how much computing power is involved in
yeah.
solving that math equation that makes you the winner of the next block reward. And that's the crazy part. It's all of that compute that's kind of going into what is fundamentally almost nonsense, but at the same time the blockchain, the way it is structured and the way the incentives are structured, it doesn't work without that hard math problem to solve. So it's it's crazy, right? And I think in some of if
I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
the currency part of this is it's just like any other currency, right? So what is the value really, right? It's only
Yeah,
the value that someone's willing to pay for it, right? Or
exactly. Yeah,
exchange it for,
yeah.
right? Once they hit saturation, right? So what's going to happen then when people drop out? Miners are going to be like, hey, we can't mine anymore, so what are we doing,
Yeah,
right?
no,
We got to move our
no. So the transaction rewards will have to be good enough to justify that mining. But yeah, it's hard to it's hard to imagine what the future is going to be for this. And
yeah.
anybody you talk to from the technology sector, you'll probably find like three types. You'll find the optimists. Usually they're the ones who have some stake in the whole thing, right? So they'll be like, no, this is the future. Like banks are gonna be a thing of the past. But like, and then there are the realists or the skeptics and or the cynics, that's on brand for our podcast. But at least I'm definitely leaning toward the cynical side, just because of the fact that there are these limitations in terms of technology, physics, math,
And
that
also,
yeah,
just to add to that
yeah,
is there is really no limit to whether you get to start a new currency, right? You can do it. Like
yeah,
you
no,
and I could figure out
100%,
we could
100%.
just build a new currency, and that's
Yeah,
it's so. I mean, that kind of no barrier to entry is
yeah,
also a problem,
yep,
right? And the crypto market's flooded with all types of currency. We saw that whole thing with Dogecoin. That started out as a joke, right?
yep, yep. I mean,
But it went a whole different way.
yeah. Disclaimer: I hold, I think, about $100 worth of Dogecoin just for fun, like back when it
Yeah,
was
but
like
that's the thing,
five
right?
cents or whatever. And I was just keeping
But
it
that, I
for,
mean, that
yeah,
goes back to the whole
yeah,
thing about like the Indian marketing agenda for cryptocurrency
uh-huh,
is it's cheap buy-in. Why don't you do it? Right. So that's what that is. Right. So
yep,
Dogecoin was funny and it was cheap enough. You
yep,
had disposable income. Why
yep,
not?
exactly, yeah, yep. So, but the
And
fact
if you
whether
make a
it's,
quick buck, make a quick buck.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
it's almost akin to gambling at this point. I would say, especially with the global scenario of like how things are going. I mean, so I would like to talk about one sort of positive point about crypto. Given the current situation in Ukraine and Russia, apparently crypto has become a very useful sort of outlet for people to kind of hedge themselves against hyperinflation, especially with the what's happening to the Russian ruble. Apparently, there are
Yeah.
reports all over Reddit and a couple of other news sites that Russians are basically parking their savings or moving, trying to move their savings and sort of money into crypto markets just to be safe, right? Like if your savings gets devalued, 5x, 10x, then that's obviously like like it
Yeah.
genuinely affects people's lives. So this seems to be an exit for a lot of people. But again, it's a very limited sort of like use case, and we don't know how things are going to go globally for the next couple of
Yeah, and just on Ukraine
years.
as
Yeah.
well, like it seems that Ukraine is selling NFTs to support its military, right?
Yep, yep. I just read that news article as well. Yes, Ukraine is apparently selling
Yeah,
NFT.
it's I mean
It's
real world use cases, yes, but
yes,
scalable, no.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, some of the other tech news that I wanted to move on to as part of the podcast is, we'll talk about a little bit of some of the topics that are more US centric this way. It will also affect people in India, obviously, but it's a very tiny sliver of the market, and that's the new Apple Mac Studio and the Mac Studio display, and the fact that it's kind of getting some mixed press from different outlets. The Mac Studio in general, people are kind of receptive to, but there's a lot of questions about Apple's practices when it comes to right to
So
repair.
this is the thicker version of the Mac Mini, right?
Yes,
That's, I
yes,
mean,
the T,
more performance, the
yeah,
M1 Ultra or something like
correct, the THICC version of the Mac Mini. Um, and on paper, like the what Apple is doing with Apple Silicon is absolutely mind blowing in terms of how they're able to take that chip architecture and scale it up, um, and do that within this 1 or 2 year time frame, and sort of give these generational increases that is hasn't been seen in the computer industry since sort of the 90s, maybe. I would like to add that the single core performance of the M1 family is roughly the same, so the clock speeds are still the same. So if you're running like a single core workload on this Mac Studio box versus the cheapest M1 MacBook Air, for example, the price differential is crazy, right? The Mac Studio is, I want to say, 2,999 or something like that starting. I could be wrong, but and the MacBook Air is
just
$900.
around $1,000.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
just
Yeah, but the single core performance is exactly the same on both of these. So the Mac Studio is targeted very specifically to a market of folks that are,
look, it's
creators.
enterprise. I mean, there's no two ways about it. Even creators, right? So if we
Yeah,
go the path of creators are going to use it, creators aren't using it. Enterprise creators are using it,
enterprise
or very
creators,
large
exactly.
scale
Yeah,
creators,
literally
right, are
people who
using it.
have a yeah people that have a studio, fundamentally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And
Um.
and and I like the fact that, like, okay, fine, it's a good solution for people who need to do that kind of work.
Yeah.
But what does it do besides, like, maybe you know more about this, but what does it do besides a Mac Pro? Like what a Mac Pro does?
Oh, so the Mac Pros were involved in. I'm sorry, they were using the earlier sort of Intel architecture, and one of the things that
Oh no,
Mac.
that's fine. Besides the architecture, I was specifically talking about the product lines, right? So the product line
Okay.
of Mac Pro, why shouldn't it have the M1 Ultra, and
Oh
why
no, no,
shouldn't
so
it just be
that's going to be the next release. So the I Apple at the end of the presentation when they talked about this transition that they're making to M1, they said that specifically that there's only one item in their product line that hasn't been moved over to Apple Silicon yet, and that's the Mac Pro. So the Mac Pro is going to be the flagship, most expensive, and historically more or less
So
most
this would just be like
configurable.
one step down.
One step down from the Mac Pro. But as it stands now from the Apple product line, this is the top of the line best Mac you can get, even when compared to the earlier Mac Pro, because it hasn't been refreshed in 2 or 3 years, basically. So
Right.
anybody who's
Right.
working with those specific formats like ProRes, for example. So if you're a Final Cut Pro shop doing a lot of video editing on ProRes, this thing has a ridiculous amount of like it can play like something like 3 or 4 8K ProRes streams in parallel, which is unheard of.
Damn.
So anybody doing really intensive high end video editing, this is the like people who have a single project
Yeah.
that can pay for this are the ones who will be running to the store to buy it, right? That's basically like just finishing one single project makes all of the difference. Yeah. But yeah, so but the main thing that I wanted to talk about this was apparently that Apple has been sort of fudging, or like not fudging, but they're making these sort of deliberate product decisions that are anti-consumer, and one of the main ones with the Mac Studio is apparently that there's some sort of lock on the SSD. So the SSD is interchangeable, and this was reported by iFixit that you could actually there is a slot in which you could change the SSD. It's not soldered onto the motherboard, but I think there is some issue when it comes to the actual sort of DRAM cache. So SSDs have a cache that enables for storing of results that were read from the SSD. That cache is on the motherboard, so the types of SSDs that you can change, or whether even this is user replaceable, is going to be like a big question mark going forward. And this is just Apple's practices
Yeah.
in
I mean,
general.
that's pretty standard
Yeah,
Apple, right?
yeah. But what is even more egregious apparently is that the Mac Studio display, which is a $1,600 display, which is a 5K monitor and whatnot. So it's you're paying hundreds of dollars in extra premium to compare to products that are similar. It doesn't have a removable power cord. Yeah,
See,
it's absolutely crazy. And
I mean, design where it is, but
no, no, no. But
that's something that should have,
yeah, it should have.
yeah, should have
Yeah,
been considered.
I it's I don't know. At some point there was some engineering prototype, and they said we don't have the time. Let's just ship it. But yeah, they're being trashed all over the press now for selling a $1,600 monitor that whose power cable doesn't come off. And
Yeah.
at that price point, you want your experience to be perfect. It's not just the power cable, by the way. So the Mac Studio monitor apparently has a A11 Bionic chip and camera hardware that's equal to the iPhone 11. That's already in the monitor, and then and the complaint is that the camera quality of the camera software that they shipped with the monitor is not up to par. People are complaining that it's worse than previous webcams, and
Really?
yeah, we are getting to a point where you're going to have to do a firmware update to your monitor just to get a better webcam display. So Apple's going to be updating the monitor soon. But yeah, apparently that whole monitor runs iOS, which is just crazy. Like absolutely nuts.
Why? Like, it's
So
ridiculous. Like, it's
so the main thing that they wanted to promote with the new monitor is Apple has this cool feature called Center Stage. So it's a
yeah,
machine learning based sort of technology on your camera that allows you to sort of like pan and zoom and follow you around
yeah,
while
yeah.
you
Yeah. I
walk
mean, they
around.
have
Yeah,
those on the new iPads as well, right? So
yeah,
they
yeah.
had
They
it
have
from
that.
the last year
Yeah,
iPad Pros.
yeah. So, and the
The
idea is
new
that I
Air has
think,
it as well. Yeah.
yeah, the idea is that I guess they had a lot of A11s and they already had the software written for and optimized for the A11 Bionic on how that whole ML process or model works inside the camera. So they're like, yeah, let's just slap it onto a monitor and call it a day, right? So essentially, it's Apple trying to be penny wise, but also at the same time being super lazy in some sense. Or it's definitely like a half baked product. The display, at least, the Mac Studio has got a lot of people in that very specific niche very interested in it. Anyway, so let's move on to
Yeah.
the next news article, and So the other news article that I wanted to talk about was that there is a BIOS bug in um, Dell's BIOS, and this has affected millions of Inspiron, Vostro, XPS, and Alienware systems. And this comes just a few weeks after a similar vulnerability that affected um, HP BIOSes. And
Interesting.
this is more of a like a technical topic because this is related to the new sort of BIOS systems that most PC manufacturers use called UEFI. And UEFI BIOSes are a new sort of BIOS system compared to the old, legacy BIOS. And
Okay.
there seem to be a lot of attack vectors that are coming through UEFI, and the so, I mean, I'm not going to discuss too much about the sort of technical nitty gritty of the situation, but basically, it's just a call to action. Is like, if you guys have um, a newer Dell
And we have
system.
like a yeah. I was gonna ask that. Like, how old of devices are being affected? Like, are these
So
new devices or
it
legacy devices? What's happening?
so apparently, from Dell, this affects millions of Inspiron, Vostro, XPS, and Alienware systems. As far as I know, UEFI has been part of the Dell lineup for at least 5 to 6 years now. So potentially, tons of laptops are involved in this security vulnerability. So it's just a quick call to action. Like, if you have a Dell or HP machine, just go visit the website and or check your Dell update or whatever update software that you have, and make sure you get the latest sort of BIOS updates.
Immediately when you say all of
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is enterprise. So we're thinking about enterprise. Like a lot of those are latitudes. I know you didn't mention what latitudes in the lineup, but Dell
Uh,
and HP have a lot of you know
yeah. Yeah.
foothold on enterprise
Yeah. No.
offerings as well. So
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I'm again. We'll have some information about this, I guess, in the podcast description or the YouTube description. But if you have that, please go and check if your system is affected in the Dell BIOS bug, and update them as soon as possible. So what makes these UEFI malware that attaches to UEFI even more insidious or more dangerous than before is that, so typical malware attaches itself to your host operating system, right? And the fact that if you just reinstall the operating system, that you effectively get rid of the malware. But with UEFI,
yeah,
the vulnerability or the issue or the malware, if it hooks itself into the UEFI system, it can persist even across OS installations. So even if you went in and said, "Oh, just erase or restore my laptops, wipe it completely clean," it's there's a very good chance that if this vulnerability was used by a
it's going
certain
to carry
malware,
forward as
it'll
well. Yeah.
it'll just carry forward. Right? It's crazy. And this
So what would you? I mean, I'm thinking you'd need a BIOS flash or something like that
yeah.
to
So basically,
fix
just
this.
just visit the manufacturer of your machine, Dell or HP, and
Yeah.
and enter your, if it's Dell, enter the service tag number, or just the model number, and install latest updates. But the most I wanted to kind of take this to segue to a really important topic in terms of at least PCs back in India, especially where there's a very high incidence of piracy. So people haven't really been pirating Windows, as far as I know, because Windows is effectively free as long as you
Yeah, I mean, you
have
got to run
some.
with the activate now or activate your Windows,
Yeah.
something like that.
So
That's the entire thing, right? You can run
yeah,
perpetually with
yeah,
that
yeah,
watermark. You'll
yeah.
be fine.
No, not just that, but effectively, if your computer came with Windows, you are on this perpetual free upgrade path of Windows. Like, so, starting from Windows 7
This is true. Yeah.
to 10 to 11, you have a free upgrade path. If you're a student in most educational institutions, I think Microsoft offers, like, some kind of, if you have a .edu or .edu.in or .ac.in email address. I'm not sure, you'll have to double check this. I'm just speaking off top of my head. There are programs where Microsoft essentially gives you Windows for free. um, but yeah, the
Yeah.
the biggest problem is the folks that are still pirating Windows. um, Typical sort of like, if you don't activate Windows, uh, again, I'm not entirely sure about this. If you're running a fixed version or a changed version of Windows that doesn't show, like a quote unquote cracked version of Windows, there's a very high probability that it doesn't get updates, and if it doesn't get updates, you keep your
Well, that's the thing, right? So,
yeah
like you said, a lot of people aren't pirating right now, but the people who do, just on a very large scale, are people who haven't upgraded their PCs in a while,
yep
right? So
yep
the reason for them not to upgrade their OS is because the OS is probably not supported,
yep
right?
that's also
So
true. Yeah
they probably have a very old system. They're running all these
yeah
different, activities that they need to do without spending a lot of coin, right? So
yep correct.
that's what it comes down to. So uh, these kind of uh, segment or this segment of people is really who are going to be affected by all of this stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it really isn't people who've upgraded in the past 3 or 4 years.
So no, I mean the other point I wanted to make is not necessarily just the operating system, but also the actual sort of like software that you run on your
Oh
machine.
yeah,
that's
yeah, that's a
that's a
different
whole
story. That's a different story.
that's a whole other ball game in terms of like how risky that is. Like from productivity software to games to like all sorts of stuff. As far as I know, I mean, you can talk to sort of technology analysts or look at technology reports about like a percentage of quote unquote users that might be running pirated versions of different pieces of software. And to be honest, it's not entirely blameworthy on users as well, right? Like, so people who are not actively engaged in a certain type of employment where the employer pays for these licenses for productivity software, they're if you're not in that situation, it can be prohibitively expensive to afford things like Adobe Creative Suite or Microsoft Office and things
Yeah.
like that, right? So
See, again, I mean, it really depends, right? So
yeah
if, I mean, what you're talking about is if somebody's doing work and they need these softwares for
yeah
work, and their organization they're working for is not willing to provide that,
yeah
that's really a different problem altogether, right? I don't
yeah
see that happening as much, right?
yeah
That
yeah
isn't happening as much,
yeah
to be
yeah
honest. Like at least in the IT sector, that isn't happening as much
yeah
because compliance is a very big
yeah,
deal.
as long as you're a reputable firm, and like you are like you want to keep your
Yeah,
reputation intact, and you want to make sure that you don't get
exactly.
hit with issues later on. But yeah, no, I'm talking about more of like personal users and things like that. And it's a big problem. Like the um pirated software in general, there are costs associated to the pirate in terms of hosting software on shady malicious websites or whatever. Typically there's always going to be some kind of gotcha when it comes to installing pirated software or pirated games for that matter, and usually it'll
Yeah.
be some kind of malware that's that could be actively listening to your system or snooping through your files. There could be a miner which literally will run a sort of like a crypto miner on your PC. Although
Mm.
that's reduced a lot these days because it's difficult to gain a lot of computing power from your average machine unless it has a really high profile GPU on it. But nonetheless, they can pool all of these resources of all compromised machines and try to, run a mining pool and get some money out of that. And but the even more dangerous risk nowadays is ransomware. And ransomware typically might not affect personal users as much as that it affects, the leverage is a lot lower
Businesses.
on personal users. But according to an Economic Times report that came out a couple of weeks ago, one of the top countries affected by ransomware is apparently India. So,
Yeah.
according to U.S. security firm CrowdStrike, at least 49% of Indian businesses that have some sort of digital presence recorded multiple ransomware attacks as of last year. So that's definitely an issue. So again, security needs to be tightened up everywhere. What really amazes me, I'm sorry if like this discussion is going all over the place. The other thing that really amazes me is just how security agnostic like government departments are when it comes to, so if you go to your average Indian government website,
Yeah.
it's absolutely like you can see from the page design that not a lot of thought has been put into the, or people haven't essentially upgraded the website in a long time. But the moment
It's a really a fix it when it's broke kind of situation,
oh
like with
yeah,
a lot of these
100%,
sites, right?
100%, 100%. So yeah, in general, try to avoid pirated software. Look for free and open source alternatives. Keep your computer up to date. That's all the advice I can give when it comes to this stuff. And that's kind of the tech news that I wanted to cover in this podcast. So we'll shift over to automotive, and I'll kind of toss a few topics over to Govind because he's I think personally he's a bigger gearhead than I am. But I think we can sort of talk about the automotive situation. We both have interests in cars essentially, and we kind of like to see what the industry is doing. So the main
Yeah.
thing that I wanted to talk about is in the automotive news is just the sheer number of EVs that are scheduled to release this year and next. So in here in the US, the market is primarily crossover focused, which is very different from India, where the segment leaders tend to be hatchbacks. I guess the B1, C1 segment sedan, the segment classes
Yeah.
for automotives back in India. Uh, the what has suddenly pushed the EV back into focus is the high gas prices here, or the high petrol prices here in the US.
And that's the same here.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the same here. I mean, over the past couple of days, it's just been like increasing every day. And it's
yeah. What is it
funny
where you
enough,
are
there's
right
there's a
now?
lot of
How
it's
much?
108. I just filled up for 108 per
Wow,
liter. So I don't know
wow.
what that
Okay.
converts into.
Yeah, in gallons and dollars. The last time I filled up here in the Chicago suburb area, I paid roughly 4.3 or 4.4
And
dollars
some
per
of
gallon.
this, I mean,
Yeah.
some of this is because of the current situation in Russia,
Oh yeah,
Ukraine, all
yeah.
that stuff,
100%,
right? So
100%.
some of this is because of that. But in India, it's been happening for over the past 2 or 3 years, where
Yep.
just before COVID, or even just at the start of COVID, I still remember I topped up at 78 for a
Yeah.
liter. So
Yeah.
that's 30 rupees
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
over
100%.
as it stands today, right? So for a liter.
Yeah.
So that's taking a big hit on all of the sectors, including pricing for deliveries, all your logistic services. Everything is just shot up because that's what the country is going to have to run on.
Yep.
And coming back to the whole EV thing, that's exactly why the entire um, market is shifting towards EVs, and there is government backing and subsidies for
Yep.
EV purchases as well, right?
Yep.
So the entire ecosystem is very much pushing towards that change.
Mm-hmm.
It's just about the adoption levels
Yep.
and the feasibility when it
Yep.
comes down to things, right? So
100%. Yeah.
let's start with charging stations, right? So there aren't that many charging stations. Even in T1 cities, there are nearly not enough charging stations if people were to start buying up EVs. Now,
Yep.
I know in the most recent news article that I read about it is they're expecting to see at least a 10% of all the purchases
Mm-hmm.
of not commercial, consumer oriented vehicles to be EVs by 2030.
I see.
So that's 10%, right? So I mean, in perspective, that seems like a very small number, but
Mm-hmm.
you got to think about how large India is and what the infrastructure that needs to go behind it. And we're not talking about too far away into the future. We're talking about 6-7 years,
Yep.
and that kind of infrastructure in that short time, that's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of the Indian companies or automotive companies really are making huge investments and huge bets on EVs being the next big thing.
Yep.
Um, the challenges aside, there are some decent offerings from Indian manufacturers now.
Yes.
Um, range anxiety is going to be a thing,
Oh yes.
but I don't think people are buying EVs in India right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who the people aren't the same people who need to do long drives, right? So they're
Oh yeah.
city
100%.
commuters,
100%.
or
Yes.
they're sticking to their same kind of zone.
Yep.
So those kind of folks who have that disposable income to try out something
Mm-hmm.
new, right? To experiment,
Yep.
they're doing it, right? I've been seeing a lot of EVs locally as well, so
Yeah.
it's great to see that. and definitely the market is highly dominated by two-wheelers as well, right?
Yeah.
So all your motorcycles, your scooters, your mopeds, whatever else. And there's a lot of movement and a lot of traction there as well. Is
Hmm.
uh, Ola, which is your Uber competition here in India.
Yes.
For people who don't know that, it's pretty large, so you might have come across it, but it's basically India's homegrown Uber, right?
Correct.
I'm sure they're not happy about me phrasing it that way, but just for people understanding it. So
Yep.
that's the scale of things, right? So um, they've just released and started deliveries of their first electric scooter. And this has been hyped so much that people have even talked about it. I saw a few tweets which referred to it as the Tesla of India, right? And granted, the CEO of Ola wasn't too happy about that, but
Okay.
yeah, I mean, they're the Ola of the world. That's what the response I believe was, right? So they're
I
not the
see.
Tesla of India; they're more of the Ola of the world, right?
I
So
see.
it is what it is. Call it as you may, but there is growth potential there, especially in the you know um, small commute space.
Yep.
Micromobility is another huge area of expansion in
Hmm.
T1 cities.
Okay.
The last mile, because a lot of the T1 cities have very high density of people and a lot of things happening within the same area. So
Hmm.
that last mile and that within zone kind of transit is really working out. So your Uber Eats equivalents, your Swiggies, your Zomatos, all these folks in Bangalore and T1 cities such as that is they're just ditching their scooters. They're not using their personal scooters anymore. They're just
Mm.
operating out of one area using the rideshare services within that area, right? So you
Interesting.
just pick up a scooter and then just deliver it through that area. So it's a
Interesting.
lot more economical from them, from their perspective as well, which is like at 108 rupees a liter, it's not really gonna break even at until you make a few deliveries and take your cut while the operator keeps theirs.
I
It's
see.
going to take a while for you to make up your margins.
I see. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that's the main sort of difference that people need to know between the sort of the US EV market versus the Indian EV market. Indian EV market, is primarily in for cars. It's been dominated by Tata's Nexon EV. But I think in terms of sheer volume and feasibility, um, it's the two-wheeler market that is probably going to be a lot more.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Um,
mean, they've had the Hyundai Kona here for a while, right? Not
mhm.
in large volumes. These were just import cars. They weren't manufactured here.
Mhm.
Some people did buy them.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's really a lifestyle thing at some point. The other day I
Yes.
saw a Prius, and that's
That's it.
like
That's
that's
really interesting.
super rare.
Yeah, but
That's super
also,
rare here.
you basically segued into something that I wanted to ask about, which was why aren't hybrids a bigger thing in
Yeah, it got
India?
skipped over entirely, right? The PHEVs completely skipped over. I
Yeah,
don't I don't get it.
yeah. So plug-in hybrids. So if I remember, Team BHP, the automotive enthusiast website, when they were
Yeah,
talking about the Toyota Wellfire, which is the Toyota
yeah,
luxury MPV, which is also hybrid. And Toyota does this. Every Toyota and Lexus vehicles that are sold in India that are coming in as CBU units, completely built up units, typically have uh, hybrid
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 powertrains. Yeah,
powertrains. Yeah, and Toyota's
and they
generally
had
been.
those in the. I mean, they had those in the Camry for the longest time, right? That's why Camry
Yes.
was so overpriced, even
Yes.
compared to the Accord. Like when the
Com-
Accord and the Camry were being sold side by side here,
yep.
um, it wasn't really a choose either or situation because the plug-in
Yeah.
hybrids were much more expensive.
Yeah. And so as far as I know, it kind of boils down to this sort of like face off between manufacturers and the government when it comes to subsidies. Or, I'm sure Toyota was trying their best to lobby the government in terms of like, let us reduce the import duties on hybrid powertrains or hybrid vehicles that come in. But I guess the government also has a responsibility of like protecting the interests of the Indian manufacturers at the same time, because if you artificially deflate the price of a hybrid compared to Indian ICE offerings, ICE or even EV offerings, um, that's an unfair advantage to one specific manufacturer, especially when it comes to the leader in the segment, which is Toyota. So
That's true.
I think that essentially boils down to it. But it's a shame because hybrid plug-in hybrid vehicles essentially can give you the best of both worlds in terms of
That's
like
true. I mean,
getting you that
I
fabulous mileage, solving your range anxiety problem if you do need to make longer trips. But it's that insane cost of entry which is keeping it away from Indian consumers, and it's kind of sad that that's the situation. Also, it could be argued that it's also a problem of sort of like manufacturers having exclusivity when it comes to technologies, because Toyota is the leader in the space when it comes to hybrids, right? Just because of the amount of years that the Prius has been on road in more
I mean,
developed
they
countries.
have Suzuki has their mild hybrids, right? So
Okay.
they've been selling those as well for a while here, but it's very, very, it's not worth it, right? So I mean, they're not charging a premium for it for what it's worth,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's like the Suzuki, they have their Ciaz, right? So that's always been offered with a mild hybrid system. It
Interesting.
doesn't
Okay.
do much. It makes a slight impact on
Oh, it's just
your
a
MPGs.
regenerative. Yeah. So like the first
Yeah, yeah, it's a
generation
very small system.
non-plugging, non-pluggable, non-battery
Yeah, yeah,
hybrid
it's
system.
not a
Yeah.
plugin. It's not a
Okay. Okay.
plugin. It's
I
just
see.
yeah,
So just
yeah,
regenerative power, I guess. Yeah. Okay. I see.
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, if you're like a,
Interestingly,
yeah, go ahead.
speaking of Suzuki, Suzuki Japan has just pumped in over $1 billion into a new manufacturing plant in India, just specifically dedicated to their EV lineup.
Interesting.
So we should be
Interesting.
seeing a lot of traction there. And Suzuki is a home brand of India,
Of
and
course.
then
Of course.
everybody has a soft spot for Suzuki, and that's
Yeah.
that's what you see most of your runarounds in.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
For those who are watching the video podcast, I'm just putting up the sales figures from
there you
February
go.
2022, as reported by Team PHP for India, and the sales is insane, right? The top five, four of the top five vehicles that were sold last month are Maruti, which is the Suzuki arm, technically
Indian
all in
operator, right?
Indian operator
Yeah,
of Suzuki models, or they have a technology joint venture with which is what are essentially modified and heavily modified Suzuki designs in India. Um,
yeah. I mean,
and
a lot of their cars are like straight, the exact copy of what they would offer in outside markets, but they
yep,
would be detuned or given a smaller engine just because of the fuel economy and stuff.
yep,
So
100%.
yeah, I mean that point exactly, right? So being the biggest household brand in terms of automotive, right?
Yep.
That puts you in a position of being responsible
Hmm.
and also being, or at least trying to be competitive in the market, right?
Yeah, I guess
So
they're also yeah. Go ahead.
you have all your small car or budget car purchases. Right?
Yep.
Those are the first people who you need to target, because once those people start buying into the whole EV kind of ecosystem,
Hmm.
you're going to make much bigger number of sales, right? So, and with that comes in all the investment opportunity for your charging network and everything that goes around that as well.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and for the Nexon EV, it seems like it's a bigger vertical for Tata, right? Because they are also heavily investing into
Yeah,
the charging. Because Tata owns
network.
Tata
Yeah,
Power as
exactly,
well, right? So they have an incentive
exactly, exactly.
to provide,
So
essentially,
Tata's doing that whole thing where they're building their own, like they're rebranding entirely, right? So the Tata that was around not even a couple of years ago is not the Tata we see today, right? So
oh
they've
yeah,
done a complete revamp of their brand, right?
100%,
Besides
yeah,
their name, they've done a whole upside down, right? The quality, the build quality, the deliverables, their reliability, the entire quality of the product that they're offering right now is on a whole new level. That's
hmm
completely new. I mean, to be fair, it's still a ways to go before they reach up to the even the Korean manufacturers, right?
Oh
Just in
yeah.
terms of plastics and stuff.
Oh,
But
100%. Yeah.
but the attempt they've made at refining their product is commendable, right? It's great, and the price point and their marketing push for buying Indian products, right? So consumers really go for that, and
Mhm.
Tata's in the same boat as Mahindra over there. Mahindra obviously has a few models only on offer. Tata has a whole big lineup of products. Like they've like 5 SUVs now. They've even got a little mini SUV called the Punch. It's barely an SUV, right?
Yep.
It's a
Yep.
little hatchback on stilts. That's what it is. But it counts as an SUV here, right? So that's what the market wants. The
Yep.
market
Yep.
wants that, and they've delivered. And
Interesting.
all of these vehicles are getting EV platforms as well. As I know, they've just moved into the Tata Ultras, which you earlier mentioned, right? The Indian mass market segment is hatchbacks. So
Yep.
that's your hatchback solution. So I mean, that's a really good offering. And although I haven't seen many on the road, they've just started that a few months ago.
Mhm.
Uh, I think that's going to really pick up.
Yep. And what's actually kind of interesting is, I guess it's sort of similar in the US, but EV adoption is a lot easier for um, non-city people, right? So technically, people who have their own house and have a
Yeah,
garage. So
absolutely.
it's going to be really interesting to see this. So tier one, tier two cities where most people are housed in apartments, their charging solution is essentially a big question mark unless they can get their housing society, the Indian equivalent of an HOA, to agree on some way to
Yeah,
get some sort of parking, some charging solution. Contrast that with our
I
experiences
think
in
I think
Kerala,
so.
right?
It's there's I mean, yeah, even in Kerala, if like living in an apartment, it's not going to work out, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
like you said, the housing association could say a lot about it.
yeah.
So there is, however, a lot of opportunity there for newer brands to start up and
Hmm.
build stations and
Yep,
just offer that as a product line, right?
yep.
We build charging stations for your housing association, and there's
Yeah,
tons of those around.
yeah,
That's a business on its own. If
yeah.
you want to
Obviously,
get into that and you have the kind of right approach for it, it can be done.
yep. It can be an additional revenue stream
They
to the
just
housing
they
association as well, right? Like
well,
there can be
yeah,
some,
it
yeah,
could work out like the whole ATM
yeah,
system,
yeah.
right? So
Exactly, exactly.
yeah, it could work out like that.
Yeah, no, but my point being, like, in semi-urbanized environments like Kerala, especially with certain segments of consumers, like self-employed professionals, like doctors and lawyers and things like that. This comes from like an anecdotal experience with my father's neighbor, who is a cardiologist based in Kerala in Calicut. Uh, he just switched over to the Nexon EV, and that's essentially because he lives in a house with a garage, right? Like with a car porch. Um, and the fact
Yeah,
that you can, when you buy one of these vehicles from Tata, they'll come and set up that home charging solution for you. But what's even more interesting is that I've seen videos and reports of people who are running EVs, basically running EVs with a combination of the EV plus solar. So if you own your own house, then you have that roof real estate to establish like a solar platform, and some of the incentives that the power companies are giving. It is an upfront investment, obviously, and it is targets a very specific segment of your,
exactly.
you know, it's not
I,
it's not
I mean,
scalable in that
this was a
sense.
thing.
Yeah,
Exactly. I mean,
yeah,
this was a thing, right? So
yeah.
this was a thing. It was, um, you know, a lot of people have thought about it, and some people have done it, and they've
Hmm.
been made famous because of their ideas and everything. That's good. But again, when it comes to scalability, it's
Yeah.
not really changing the ecosystem. That's one person's story,
Yes,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And the solar grids back to the power supply company. It's not something that everybody can do,
Yep.
right?
Yep. There
Honestly,
is.
who's going to sit and monitor that? And
Yeah.
it's expensive to set up a solar grid. It's a
Yeah. It
one-time
is.
investment, sure,
It
but the
is.
EV
Yeah.
itself is coming in at a high cost.
Yep. 100%. All right. And to kind of move on to the final segment of today's podcast, we'll talk about a few fun, sort of like gaming focused stories. Um, so, the first sort of article that I want to talk about, which was reported by Gadgets 360 from NVIDIA, is that the PS5 just restocked in in India on March 24th. We're recording this on March 26th. I don't know if people ended up getting this console, but it's interesting given, like, of course, now,
all the
so
restocks,
yeah,
all the restocks that have happened have sold out in a matter of a few minutes, right? So it's
it,
always announced, and then next thing you know, you've lost your opportunity, right? So
it's
I don't know of anyone who's won it the right way.
so
It's
so
almost like a lottery.
yeah, so what's really interesting about sort of like the gaming market when it comes to the US when compared to India is that in India it's a hyper premium product, which is, obviously very expensive. Like for the cost of like a PS5 or current generation console, you could easily get yourself like a sort of a medium tier or a low end tier notebook that may have some sort of GPU on it, which is enough for you to, um, which is enough for you to play basic games. Um, just 1 second, Govind. I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, okay, you're back. Sorry about that. So, yeah, so the point I was trying to make was that, yeah, so for the price of a PS5, you can essentially uh, get a low end or medium tier notebook, right? A gaming notebook, and that allows you to do a lot more than just game. But
Well, no. I'm gonna argue with that. It's
oh,
the
okay,
price of a PS5. You're not getting an entry level gaming laptop, right? So you're
really?
getting an entry level gaming laptop about 8 to 10K higher than that,
Oh,
right?
I see.
And
Okay,
this is the PS5 with the disc edition. So I'm comparing it
interesting.
with that. So if you end up, getting a digital edition, that's almost 20K off before you get to a decent
Okay,
enough, not decent enough, any gaming laptop really with
interesting.
I'm talking 1650 even,
I see.
right? Maybe you could get some of the MX series graphics cards in a
Yeah,
PC,
yeah,
but even though, I mean,
that's
those
what I
aren't
was.
really gaming
Yeah, they're
laptops.
not. So it's not really an apples to apples comparison, right? Like, I mean, PS5's got ray tracing and
Exactly,
other higher end hardware.
exactly.
No, but so maybe this is something that I should be asking you instead of sort of speculating on my end. Like, how is the market looking like for consoles in India? It used to be not that great before. The primary sort of
It's good.
it's good. Okay,
It's good. Right now, it's just the unavailability of the PS5, and people don't want to buy PS4s anymore just because they know PS5 is out there, right?
I agree. Yeah. Okay.
You can get a PS5, but you're gonna pay heavily for that premium,
Mm,
right? Because you're
interesting.
not buying it retail. You're gonna buy it off of someone who's bought it up and stockpiled.
Mm,
So if you're gonna do that, you're gonna do that. And it's just like people in two boats, right? So there's been console gamers and there's been PC gamers. There's like very rarely are there people doing both, right?
okay.
You have to be really well off
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
in
I agree.
India to do both, right? So there are a lot of people getting into gaming right now because of the entry point at which gaming laptops come. People need laptops. That's a productivity device in the end of the
Mm,
day, right?
mm,
A productivity device is an easier sell for whoever's funding it to
mm,
to purchase, right? So if you were to go in on a laptop, you might as well just get an entry level gaming laptop,
mm.
and that can play pretty much any game on at least low settings, right? Which
Yep.
you're fine.
Yeah.
You could get started like that. And I mean, a direct comparison of that would be like, let me say I'm trying to run a AAA title on a entry level laptop right now.
Hmm.
It's on medium or medium to low settings. It's going to do at least 30 frames a second. That's PS4. Like, it's not doing any better than 30 frames a second.
I see. No, that makes
So,
sense. Yeah. I think
and
my
for an entry level gamer,
yeah,
you're not caring FPS. You're not caring about FPS.
that's true. No, I was just I was trying to in my head trying to picture like what the change in the console market in India looked like, because my experience was from a long time ago where console gaming was very niche in India, and most people sort of preferred to be on the PC side of things because especially my view coming from like being a student in India. Gaming laptops were exceptionally popular because you could just kind of convince your parents that, hey, I'm going to engineering school.
Yeah, I mean
I
that comes back to the whole
yeah,
productivity thing. I need
yeah,
schoolwork done.
I
Yeah.
need to school. Yeah,
So
but the reason I mentioned this is because as you were talking, I just kind of pulled up this story from IG in India about how well the PS4 and PS5 is doing. So as of July 2021, um, basically Sony has sold more than 500,000 units of PS4, which is very interesting. The fact that like the Sony was able to sell that many of them, and then over 20,000 PS5s were sold as of last year. I'm sure that number would have easily doubled as of now. So that's really really interesting. And I know that the at least back in the PS4 era, the main driver was FIFA. Most people exclusively got the PS4 and then literally played one game on it, which is FIFA, because they were like FIFA fanatics, and that was the best that was the best experience on the PS4 for a lot of people. But yeah, it's interesting to see the situation changing rapidly in India, and
I
a
mean,
lot more
see,
people
there's
getting into
there's a lot of
consoles.
things happening, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of things happening on this front. So um, let's talk about consoles again. So it was last decade, right? So your era of your Xbox 360s and your PS3s and your
Hmm.
even entering into PS4s, the
Yep.
availability of these consoles was not that high, right?
Hmm.
So, and the knowledge about whether console gaming was a big thing was limited to people coming and telling people that, hey, this thing exists, you should get in on this action, right? The other hand is if you get a PS5 today in India, right, you're going to buy games at 4,000 rupees.
Hmm.
If it's a new game and if it's a AAA game,
Yep.
which is most likely what you want to play on a PS5. So 4,000 rupees is a very high price point. Coming back to PC gaming, there's
Yeah.
a lot of games on Steam and Epic. Epic throws out free games all the
Oh,
time.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you can make up the difference in no time.
Yes. Especially if you are one of those gamers that likes to play different games. But
Yeah.
again, it goes back to the point that I made, right? Like a lot of, I'm sure there is some sizable percentage, and only Sony and maybe other market analysts know about this, but like the number of single game console owners in India is going to be pretty interesting, or single game or single series, like in the sense that I bought a PS4 and I got the FIFA that was of the year that I got the PS4. And
See, there will be see that's in a like that's everywhere, not just in India, right? Because those
yeah,
things come in bundles. A lot of times these are gifted, right? You
yep,
gift somebody a bundle pack. They
yep,
don't play it ever, right? That's it.
interesting, yeah,
I know a lot of people in my circle who have had that happen to them,
yeah,
right? You
and
get a combo and a bundle that's bought for you, and then you never have any time to play, and then just catching dust.
and it's not like that's exclusively in India. Apparently, over here in the US,
Yeah,
like
it's everywhere.
the it's not just FIFA. Like over here, apparently 2K is a big reason for people to buy an Xbox. It's just like, okay, let's just get an Xbox and let's just get NBA 2K. That's it, right? That's the only game you're playing, So they're
Bundle games always have that going on for them, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just part of the deal. I mean, when the PS4 came out, it was Destiny. I think it was Destiny. Like it was just
yep,
a lot of
yep,
people had Destiny for no reason. Like
yep.
they weren't even interested in playing it, but they had Destiny.
Over here, I think it was the Spider-Man, because that's the bundle that I got with my PS4.
No, but that's much later. No,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
much
talking
later.
about like
Not the entry level. Yeah,
the first PS4 that came out.
that's a
I
good
think.
point actually, because when the PS5 initially released, it was on this promise of games coming out. There wasn't a like a console killer game yet until about 2 weeks ago when
Do you know what?
Elden Ring came out, and people have been going crazy about Elden Ring on PS5 for
Yeah,
quite some
people have
time.
been
Yeah.
going crazy about that. But GTA is back now on PS5. That's what I just like. Why would you remaster that? Like, just do GTA 6 already.
Oh my god! I
Like
mean, there's one.
2013.
No, there's a
We're
big reason.
talking.
It's shark cards, right? It's the revenue that Rockstar is making on basically doing almost no work is staggering. Like the
No,
in
but that's the thing, right? Like
yeah,
they've done a remaster. like that's work. That's not doing nothing. They're doing a lot of things. They're pushing events. They're doing keeping it exciting. That's
It's
all there.
it's true. It's true. I agree with you, but it's yeah. I mean, to paraphrase another sort of personality on another podcast on G4, it's like y'all got to stop buying shark cards. That's the only way you're going to get GTA 6.
GTA
As
6.
long as people
Yeah.
buy shark cards, GTA 6 will keep getting pushed, so to speak. There was some
Yeah.
confirmation from Rockstar a couple of weeks ago by, I think, a Rockstar internal dev, or like a reply to a tweet, that GTA 6 is in active development, which we are all pretty sure that it is. It's just that
Yeah, we weren't doubting that it's
yeah,
not in
yeah,
development,
yeah.
right? So any big company is going to have
It's
R&D team at least
yeah,
to dabble on what's coming up next.
yeah. But it is absolutely crazy. Just the number of generations that GTA 5 has been on. I played and finished the GTA 5 on release on PS3, and here we are more than 7-8 years later, and it's still, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
This is crazy. Anyway, moving on to our next story, which is the Xbox Game Passes, a very popular service. It's something that I subscribe to as well, and they just announced that they've reduced their prices for subscriptions in India. So starting from April 2022, the Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which used to cost 699 rupees per month, is now going to reduce to 499 rupees per month. And if you get a
I
three
always
month,
thought it was $4.99.
that's no, I'm talking about specifically about the Ultimate. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, Ultimate includes game streaming and a couple of other things. I'm off the top of my head, I forget what it is. But if you wanted to get the
Right.
PC gaming pass, it's going to go down from 489 per month down to 349 a month, which is, I think, pretty
That's a
impressive
steal.
given
That's a
given
steal.
the collection that Game Pass has. So
Let's just do some quick math. I'll do some quick math. And
I'm
see
easily
what is 350.
yeah, I'm easily paying
That's
double
like
that. Yeah,
that's crazy.
because I'm paying
That's
approximately $700. Sorry, 700 rupees per month. $10 ish per month for my normal version of Game Pass. I don't even have Ultimate. I love it because of the sheer
just curious
variety.
to know if
Yeah,
Game Pass is also on the same kind of path as Netflix, password sharing and everything.
that's a good point. As far as I know my nephew was using Game Pass, but from somebody else. But unlike Netflix, I think there's a hard cap on like number of concurrent game players, like
Sessions. Right.
sessions. Yeah, I definitely know that Steam does this. Steam has family sharing as well, so you can
Oh,
officially
yes,
say,
it does. Yeah.
yeah, so you can officially say that, hey, I would like to share my Steam library with this person. Steam also locks out a user when somebody's using the Steam. It doesn't even have to be the same game, apparently. So if anybody is playing any game from your library, then anybody else, that is, like, you shared it with a friend, and then you go and you try to play it, it's like, you're kind of locked out. So I believe Xbox Game Pass does that as well. But the Xbox Game
Yeah.
Pass collection is absolutely staggering at this point, because in the US at least, it also includes EA Play, which is
Yeah.
which is
Here as well.
yeah,
It's
which is
got either. EA
yeah,
Play.
which is the entire sort of collection. But I also wanted to shout out, like, one of the most fun games that I've played recently, on which was on Game Pass, which was actually Guardians of the Galaxy, which is very interesting in the sense that, I'm generally not a big fan of, like, the MCU, but Guardians of the Galaxy, the game, was essentially like another Guardians of the Galaxy movie. It had a lot of, sort of witty dialogue. The story was one of the best game stories, single player experiences that I've played in a long time. There's a lot of humor that's, very MCU esque. And there are, multiple branching paths that you can take in the game, that sort of decide, like, parts of the ending. but it was a simple, quick, single player experience that maybe was 20-25 hours worth of gaming. I'm not sure exactly, but it was a lot of fun.
Mm.
And it's a definite shout out to anybody else who has Game Pass, for example, and if they're kind of sleeping on this title. And if you generally like story driven single player experiences, this is like literally one of the best games I've played in a long time. It's like Mass Effect
Interesting.
Light.
That's big praise.
Yeah, it's like Mass Effect Light, where you still get to do those RPG style dialogue mechanics of like choosing these simple dialogues, and but with a lot of humor, which actually made it a lot of fun for me to play as well. So I was definitely super impressed with this game. Uh, yeah, but other
So
than
speaking of
that,
Game Pass
yeah,
and
go ahead.
Steam,
Uh-huh.
Steam is apparently kicking off something called Steam Next Fest in June, right?
Oh,
It's
interesting.
supposed to be something positioned to kind of up their sales of the Steam Deck and kind of support with that whole release and everything. So that's something to look forward to.
Yes, so I am on the waiting list for the Steam Deck. Mine is supposed
Mixed
to.
reviews, no?
So it really depends on the segment of gamer that you belong to. Anybody who's expecting a console-like experience from the Steam Deck should just steer away right now, because it's not going to be as simple as, oh, I have a Steam Deck, and I would like to
Let me
play
play any PC game that I want.
any PC game that I want and expect the experience to be absolutely flawless, as equivalent to as popping in a
Playing
disc
on a
or
PC, yeah.
downloading a game on a console, right? So
Oh, okay.
let's get that out of the way. Don't expect this to be a PC version of the Switch where everything works flawlessly. To their credit, Steam has been publishing a list of all of the compatible games and talking about the compatibility of different games that are
Right.
available on the Steam Deck, and they were covering a lot of big ones. The problem being is that a lot of the top sort of competitive multiplayer-ish games rely on anti-cheat software, and the anti-cheat software by design doesn't really work on Windows OSs because they want a lockdown OS and not support like things like Linux. But anyway, but people who like to tinker with their device or they want to play, emulation or retro
Yeah, but
games.
I mean that's really not the market, right? They're making a big mistake there if they're thinking that people are going to buy it because they want to play around it with the settings and do all of that stuff. It's a
You,
handheld.
yeah, 100%. You would think,
Besides a few power users who really want to tinker with their stuff, just like yourself,
yeah,
there. I mean, it's positioned as a console,
yeah.
right? And it should just be that. That's it's just my strong take on that. Is you're positioning it as a console at that price point, competition with Switch. If you don't want it to be a competition to Switch, it is a competition to Switch. Any way you
Yeah.
look at it, it's a
No,
handheld
that's true.
device which you play games on,
That's
right?
true.
So as soon as you bring in this complexity factor,
Yeah.
which is not first nature to a lot of people, you're losing a lot of customers and you're getting a lot of
Yeah.
wrong feedback.
Yeah, I mean, to Valve's credit, they've managed the press on the Steam Deck quite nicely in the sense that, they've kind of, at least with the reviewers, they've sort of managed expectations pretty nicely. So the initial software review for the Steam Deck has been a little rough, but reviewers
Yeah.
have generally praised the hardware to be excellent, and any of the software niggles that they have right now can be eased out in future software updates. So it it will try to get to the level where it's like you pick up the deck, play, select a game from the approved list of games, and then you're good to go. And I am pretty um, I'm pretty optimistic that that's actually going to be the situation when the deck is out. And the other thing is that the deck is not available for free purchase, right? It's only Steam users that have at least 1 year of Steam, uh, you know, um, sort
That's a
of.
lot of people, man. That's a lot of people.
And given the response to their pre-orders and the things like that, it's going to be a slow building ecosystem compared to the console market, which is like, okay, day one console is out. Let's see what are the day one numbers, what are the day two numbers. So this is like
Yeah.
this is a slow burn from Valve, And given their history with previous hardware releases, not almost none of the previous Valve hardware, hardware items have been staggering successes by any stretch of the imagination. So they had an initial Steam PC thing that kind of fizzled out, didn't do very well. But they also had the Steam controller, Steam Link, and the Vive HTC
Yeah.
Vive Reality and Index. They're none of them are sales, blockbusters.
Blockbusters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But the one thing as a consumer that makes me really happy about Valve is they've stood by their products through an extremely long life cycle. So I
Yeah.
believe that the future is actually pretty bright for the Steam Deck, and
I think
we'll have to revisit the software situation in the next
is
couple of months. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is it coming down to the fact that developers are going to build specifically for the Steam Deck? And I'm thinking, no, they're building for PC, and
Yes.
Valve is going to do whatever they have on their end to make it compatible.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to that, they don't really have any say or power with the ecosystem of the development cycle, right? So they're not doing anything there. So every development company is going to build to compliance terms for PC or PlayStation or
Yeah.
Xbox or Switch or whatever the case. When you don't have any compliance regulations on specifically built for Steam Deck, maybe that could be a branding opportunity for them.
No,
But
they're kind
built
of,
for Steam Deck.
there kind of is. So the idea is
Okay.
that any sort of any developer worth their weight tends to do multi-platform games, and PC is usually in one of those platforms. And if you're doing PC, unless you've locked yourself into an exclusivity deal with Epic or Xbox, you're generally going to have a Steam release of your game. If you do a Steam release of your game, and if you invest sort of some additional effort into getting your game Steam Deck optimized, there is a branding opportunity in the
But
sense that you will get a Steam Deck
no,
verified.
but that comes at a cost, right? It isn't as easy as it said, right? Like there is a huge cost and a huge operation that comes with making sure that compatibility is tested, and
Yeah.
everything in terms of compliance works out, everything in terms of performance works out, and there
So,
aren't any
so
anomalies
there's
happening just because it's on deck.
yeah. So there's the thing that Valve does, which is different from the other gaming companies in that sense, is that it's part developer effort, but part community effort as well. So Steam leverages heavily their community aspect of like all of these people who are doing the tests for because they're fans of the game. So basically they have the deck, they try installing the game on deck, and then they literally go to ProtonDB or SteamDB and then file like a wiki report of like, okay, here are the things that work, here are the things that don't work. No, I'm not kidding. And not
Free
only that,
QA.
it's free QA. Not only is it free QA, most of the Steam Deck's sort of compatibility issues with most games, unless it's like an anti-cheat problem, dials down to how are you doing the controller mapping between the fact that there is no keyboard and mouse anymore. How are you translating the input on the Steam Deck input uh, devices to the game? And to Steam's benefit, they have had this model for many years where a community forms around the game on Steam, and people upload their favorite sort of like controller mapping for this game. So
Yeah.
they've taken that aspect and they've moved it forward with the community for Steam Deck as well. So it's going to be really interesting to see. Initial reviews for games.
I mean, you touched on a point there a few minutes ago, was anti-cheat, right?
Yes.
And a lot
Yes.
of those supplementary tools that make that happen are
Yeah.
built on Windows.
Yes.
So how would that really work out?
So what Valve has said in the past couple of months, and approaching the release date of Steam Deck, is that quote unquote they're actively working with these top manufacturers in games. So at some point, I'm sure Valve can come back to the developers with a number and say, here is the deck install base, here is the average user engagement on the deck, here's the number of hours that
yeah.
people are, and also here's the number of people who start a game
No,
on
but
the.
then at that point, it
Yeah.
becomes a console, right? So for
Yeah.
all these companies that do testing, for example, right? They're testing on specific test kits on your PlayStations,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
Xboxes,
yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So this is just going to be another thing, another
Yeah,
vertical that they'd
yeah,
have to do
they'd have to do,
their
yeah,
testing on.
100%, yeah. The other super interesting thing that came out in terms of news in the last week was that Microsoft came out and issued a list of all of their Xbox games that are working on deck. So Xbox has in PC games that are part of Steam,
Ported to. Yeah.
no, that are already part of Steam that work on deck.
Okay.
Right? There hasn't been talks yet about Game Pass on deck, but if Game Pass, for whatever reason, comes on deck, or if Microsoft says that here's the native Xbox,
Yeah, that's going to
app
be a
on
whole thing.
that would be an absolute game changer if that happens. It's unlikely,
Yeah. Yeah.
but don't count it out completely. Phil Spencer, who's the head of gaming at Xbox, is one of the top sort of lightning rods when it comes to interoperability. He's the architect behind this whole. If a game comes out on Xbox, it needs to come out on PC, and we want to try to make these two separate ecosystems as intertwined as possible. And he's also not exclusively made all Xbox games exclusive to the Xbox app ecosystem. There are still a ton of Steam releases. Flight Simulator 2020, Halo Infinite, everything's available on Steam as well. So
why wouldn't I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. With Game Pass, I mean, there's been a lot of. I mean, it's not supposed to be used this way, but there has been a lot of experimentational work done on running Windows on the
yes,
Steam Deck,
yes,
and then getting Epic Store to run or whatever
yes,
else.
100%.
You could just do the same thing with Game Pass.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. It just won't be a seamless console experience, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. So that'll be a power user thing if
Yeah.
you were to try to do that.
100%. Yeah. Not only that, like it's going to be a huge pain setting up those controller mappings in Windows for individual games and all of that stuff. So Linus did a video about like how terrible, I mean, quote unquote terrible the experience is on Windows right now. But you never know. There are enough people and power users who are strong community members that issue all sort of these things. Don't discount like especially the retro gaming communities that put intense amount of work in getting things like this working. The price point is also absolutely stunning given the hardware that the Steam Deck is on offer, right? So it's undercutting their PC-based competitors by half, and the entry-level one is essentially at Switch pricing with a generational leap in hardware, right? So
yeah, I didn't get that entry-level one though. With 64 gigs of storage, what are you going to do?
But it is expandable, micro SD.
Right, but much slower, right?
So some reviews I remember saying that for a lot of games it's actually not that bad. It's that so you don't get the entry level deck if you're expecting to play next generation games on the deck. The entry level deck I think is primarily suited towards the casual gamers, the
platformer games.
Simple games and the retro enthusiasts. Like I want an amazing retro console emulator, and there's going to be this huge thing. It's already started. In fact, is there are
emulators,
Switch emulators on the deck that Nintendo has been actively going after on YouTube.
I can sense lawsuits.
Yeah, no. So Nintendo is obviously very protective of their IPs, and one of the game companies that absolutely hates emulation in all of its forms. Even if it's a game that's not currently available on any current Nintendo platform, they try their best to sort of like shut down any ability of like people to try to emulate those, like in terms of, or just even discussing this, because they've been issuing YouTube copyright takedowns left, right, and center for for anybody who's showing Switch emulation on the Steam Deck. So it's going to be really interesting how things pan out going forward. I'm pretty excited. there are some features with Steam. For example, you can sort of be done with the game session and take it over on the Steam Deck, right, or on your PC to the Steam Deck. And
Oh, okay.
apparently Valve has done this incredible standby feature where you can literally like stand by your game, turn it off, it goes into a low power battery consumption mode, which reviewers have shown to be pretty good. There isn't much battery drain, and then you can literally turn it on, and in seconds you can get back to your game, which is that console style
Pretty
feature.
good. I mean,
Yeah.
that's very much like the Xbox Series X resume feature, right?
Yeah, exactly. Xbox Series X and PS5 resume features. Yeah, I think for the first episode of this podcast, we'll go into our final news article, and that is GranTurismo 7 getting mixed reviews with some hiccups that they had. So, first of all, GranTurismo 7 was a highly anticipated game that was supposed to bring back the GT brand, which is a big PlayStation sort of IP. They hadn't
Yeah.
had a mainline GTA 7, GT 7, a GT game, Gran Turismo game, in many, many years, and Gran Turismo 7 was hotly anticipated. The reviews that have come out for this game have been sort of mixed in the sense that there seems to be like a culture clash between modern gamers or folks who expect racing games to look different from the GT style game, and then there are the GT purists who are like, no, this is kind of what we wanted. But there are some things that Kotaku did to the Polyphony Digital did. Kotaku's the news article that I'm showing on screen right now.
Yeah.
The news article being that review bombs are now turning GT7 into Sony's lowest rated game. So the main public blowback that's coming back to GT7 is the fact that even as a single player experience, it's online required, and there are
Oh,
microtransactions. Yes, and microtransactions galore in the game, which kind of makes sense in some sense, but it's steered heavily away from, say, the competitor like Forza, for example, not being that
is this
microtransaction
is
oriented.
this
Yeah.
the same thing where they said they can throw you some credits your way to fix
Yes,
that
yes.
issue? Is
So,
that
so as an apology, Polyphony Digital, gave back a ton of credits to try to ease some of the grinding that's involved in this
right?
game. And but it is kind of sad that this game developers have to lean into sort of these kind of mechanics to try to skim some additional revenue off the top for like what is essentially a full price game.
Well, to be honest, the model really isn't the same, right? So
Yeah.
it's all-time internet or all-time being active on internet is it's part of the deal now, right? So the proportion of people who aren't doing that much
Yeah.
lower than what it used to be. So you
Yeah.
need to cash in on that.
No, I agree, but that also means that you need to make sure your service is stable, right? GT
Fair
was
enough.
offline for 30 hours, where people couldn't
Wow.
even do like standard single races or like try to level up or anything. All they could do was play the demo of the game that they paid $60 for, which explains why Polyphony had to give back some virtual in-game currency as like a sorry, oops. Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah.
Well, they'll fix that in game economies, right? So they'll
Yeah,
make the
but
fixes
at the
very
same time, like
much of an
the
apology.
press is, yeah, no, the press is bad on is not as good as Sony would want on this game. The reviews are also
Yeah.
been sort of mixed for this game in the sense that purists like it, new generation sort of gamers not so much, because it is sort of like a sim style
But there
racing.
isn't as much hype, right? There isn't as much hype as what GT usually comes out with. Like I mean, this year or this version of GT, there wasn't much noise made about it. There wasn't your
Mm,
usual, this is your E3
yeah,
announcement. This is the biggest deal ever, and
yeah,
this is the racing game of the decade kind of announcement,
yeah.
right? I remember, like, wasn't it GT where they had like all these marketing gimmicks to try to get like your real world drifting into no, all of that stuff was done. Like
Yeah,
I think there was
yeah.
actually a kid who won a contest and to become an actual drift
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
racer,
I think I remember this.
and
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
still
yeah.
a GT marketing thing.
Yep,
Uh,
I guess so.
yeah. So one point was like it isn't that big anymore, right? So
Mm,
it's it's not Sony's biggest kind of cash cow to like
Yeah.
GT is PlayStation exclusive. Like it
Also,
really isn't all about exclusives anymore.
also, I feel like there's kind of this generational shift when it comes to racing games. Like, I was watching a review of GranTurismo by G4, and the review team comprised of like the new gang of reviewers that is on G4. For listeners that don't know, G4 is like a technology or gaming focused channel here that's on the US. That's in the US that recently relaunched, and they were not too enthusiastic about GT's sort of main gameplay loop of being like,
I'll tell you
drive
why
and
that
collect
is.
these cars. So this whole
Yeah,
idea
I
of
mean,
collecting cars, right? And collecting and what is called
that
car
isn't
porn or
enough, right? So
lusting after cars. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's a lot about like how game mechanics and game economies work nowadays, right? So
Yeah.
for your Gen Zs, they're used to like your instant gratification or your
Yeah.
pay
Yeah.
to get or something like that. There is no grind anymore. Right,
Yep.
like you can skip the grind. Like, forget grinding in games. Like you can skip all of that and
Yeah,
then
you
just
can
go
pay to
buy the
skip.
thing that you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, and then get that instant gratification of that skin that
Yeah,
you wanted to flex on your
exactly. And
gamer
this,
buddies and all that.
I mean,
Yeah,
to be fair to them, it's not like we would have done any differently. We were in their shoes, right? So like it's all about like perspective. And there's too much to do right now. We just started this episode with all the OTT content that's out there, and then all
yeah,
the Netflix alternatives. Like there's too many options out there. Like why do
yep.
you want to sit and grind on one game? It doesn't make any sense.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so with that, I think we can wrap up episode 1 of Tech Cynics. I hope you guys enjoyed some of our takes on some of these news stories, and we are planning to, have more episodes in the future. Please reach out to us if you have any comments and suggestions for uh, this podcast and in terms of its content and maybe some of its technical aspects. This is the first time we're recording this, and we are both of us are new to podcasting, so hopefully
Yeah.
we've done an okay job, and we'll see you next time we do the next episode.
Thank you very much. Thanks everyone.